Welcome back to the 40 Plus Fit podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm really excited about today's topic because it's absolutely foundational to thriving in our 40s and beyond. We often focus on cardio for heart health or diet for weight management, but there's one crucial element that impacts almost every aspect of our health and vitality as we age, and that is muscle mass. And to
Yeah.
explain why building and maintaining muscle is so incredibly important, I'm joined as always by our head coach, Twain. Twain, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me always.
All right, so we want to keep this one in time. We want to try to be a little bit professional today. So let's just kick things off with the big picture question.
Yes.
Beyond just looking toned, what is the primary reason someone in their 40s, 50s, or even 60s should really prioritize their muscle, increasing their muscle mass? Like, what is the core why?
Well, to be honest, for what I've observed with clients and even with some friends, really, um, if I had to put that topmost reason why it's important, aside from, just hey, having more muscle looks cool, helps you move better kind of thing. You can think of it as metabolic armor to some degree. It's like a buffer against illness and injury when it actually happens, or any other ailment that kind of hits you. It creates this cushioning and this extra layer of damage that you can take, really. I know it sounds funny, but it really is because when your body's under stress, especially with illnesses, when you have injury, maybe even when you're recovering from surgery, you have to do a surgery, it actually starts to break down your muscles, usually because you're either in a period of atrophy or your body's under extreme duress. And so when you have more muscle to actually lose, it makes it easier for you to make it through and you can hold out longer, right? You can fight this battle way longer. So let's think of it as, if you play those games where you have like the hordes and the waves of enemies coming at you and you have to defend your castle. If you can put so many layers of defense against there, then you're going to last much longer, right? And you probably can outlast the hordes of enemies that are coming.
There's also a lot of talk about increased muscle mass, also then increases your calorie burning and all these kinds of things, right? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah. I think some people do um talk about that. Well, if you wanted to get a little bit more technical about it, or maybe arguing the semantics really, it's not so much that having more muscle actually helps you burn more calories. It does, but the amount that people think is not that great. So literally having more muscle maybe burns like every kilo of muscle is somewhere between 6 to 12 calories extra that you're burning. And a kilo of muscle is a lot. Like it's a lot. Okay, so you're not really burning that much more from the muscle itself. Now, what's happening usually is that when you have a lot more muscle, at least up to a point, you tend to move better. You tend to expand energy just a little bit more when because you are able to you just have more energy and you're moving around a lot more. Having more muscle also does have some flow-on effects to other parts of your body's systems, particularly all the organs that deal with clearance and detoxification of the body, your liver, your kidneys, things like that. Having more muscle also has some impacts on your heart, your blood flow as well. And once all these things are working a bit harder, that's where actually your calorie burn goes up. So not many people realize this or not many people know this, but a large part of your daily calorie burning, okay, actually comes from all your organs doing their work. So for example, your brain is like 20% of your daily calorie burn. So if you're burning 2,000 calories a day, 400 of those calories is probably coming from your brain.
I think that doesn't apply to everybody though, because
I
some people I think
understand.
are only
Wait,
using
wait, wait, wait.
5%.
I understand that due to our interactions with different individuals and varied amount of individuals in our life, it can feel that way. But your brain does control a large part of the body, the part that does cognitive reasoning and stuff. That's not that's another part, right? Like so, just to hold your body up, yeah, it's about 15% maybe, to 20% around that range. Yeah, but jokes aside, your organs do take up a lot. Your livers themselves take up another 15 to 20% as well. Your kidneys as well, maybe another 10, so on and so forth. So these are where the actual metabolic burn comes from. But you can enhance the metabolic burn by being really healthy, by making sure that you actually have enough muscle to help you move and function even better. That's where that whole metabolic effect comes from for the muscle. So it's a larger part of it coming from its enhancement of your system versus the actual muscle burning more calories. Yeah, so just clearing that up a little bit more.
Mhm. So would it be fair to say, and you probably said this, and I just want to clarify it so that it works in my mind too, is that one of the biggest benefits you're getting is not necessarily the thermal effect from the muscle itself, but it's the
Yeah,
opportunity that you get because of the muscle, having the muscle, the opportunity to burn more calories through movement.
yeah,
Would that be fair?
correct.
Okay.
Right. So it's
Then,
a very semantic thing,
yeah,
but essentially, even if you were to say, "Hey, if I try my best to put on more muscle, I'm going to burn more," you're not technically wrong. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
but it's
that's
just
how you
very
do it.
little to really speak about.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct, correct. So like practically speaking, I don't really bother trying to correct people on this or even go down this rabbit hole just because, hey, if they are already doing what they can to build more muscle, it's net positive already.
Okay.
It's not, yeah,
So the other thing is also when we talk about muscle,
yeah.
I'm showing my age now because as I was speaking the sentence now, I've actually just lost my train of thought. Um, but all right, if it comes back to me, we'll talk about it. Ah, when we talk about muscle, increasing muscle mass here, I think it's also important to say is that we're not asking everybody to go and become the next Ronnie Coleman, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. When we talk about muscle here, we're just saying like go in, do some weight training 3 to 4 times a week, like train pretty hard, put in some effort. Make sure your muscles get some stress so that they know to adapt, they know to stay around, to stick around even as you age. Because if you don't give them a reason to stick around, your body as you age, it's just going to be like, you know what? It's too expensive to keep these things around. So let me just trim them away. And that's where the age-related sarcopenia kind of comes in.
Okay. So touching on the points that we spoke about earlier, it leads quite nicely into our previous discussion where we spoke about the importance of weight loss and the purpose of weight loss. So,
Yes.
how does increased muscle mass specifically support healthy weight management as we get older?
Well, a couple of things there, I would say. The big one actually is improving blood pressure. For the most part, more muscle mass is associated with better not articulation, circulation, and lower resting blood pressure in general. Okay, you still have to do your cardio, don't get me wrong, but when you have a more muscle mass, it tends to help with that. The other one is better insulin control, better blood sugar control. Okay, because your muscles themselves, there's this funny effect with the muscles, right? Aside from the purported calorie burning effects, one of the reasons why is because they're such a if functional tissue in the body, and one of their biggest store as much glycogen as possible. So it's a little bit of fat as well, but pretty much they uptake glycogen from the bloodstream. So this is in the absence of insulin. Meaning, usually, if you don't exercise and you don't have very much muscle and you take, some food in, it spikes your insulin up. Whether it's carbs, whether it's protein, it spikes your insulin up because your insulin is a transport molecule, right? It comes in here to kind of help. Sorry, it's a transport vessel which comes in here to kind of help shuttle these nutrients into their related places that they need to go. And this is where a lot of people have the insulin sensitivity issue when they get overly fat because um, when they do that, there's all these nutrients floating around in the blood, way more than the body can handle in terms of shuttling it here and there. And so your body's struggling and just pushing to produce as much insulin as possible. And so when you have more muscle and you are actually training your muscles, it actually opens up a gateway in your muscles that allows it to absorb in these nutrients without requiring insulin. So it really helps with blood sugar control in that sense. So the more muscles you have, technically, the better your body gets at, pulling that sugar and those other nutrients out of the bloodstream, using that as energy for movement, for function, for its own metabolic purposes as well. So that's a really big one. In fact, one of the biggest things for type 1 diabetics, even not even type 2, but type 1 diabetics. So those are people that chronically they are unable to produce insulin. They need to take insulin shots. These individuals right now they're actually prescribing weight training as part of their regime as well.
Mm. So would it be, I mean, I've heard this also mentioned on a couple of other podcasts where people spoke about it, but I don't know, I've never been able to wrap my brain around it completely from this perspective of are you getting the benefit of that from the muscle size, the muscle mass size, or are you actually getting it through because of the exercise itself?
Those aren't two different variables that compare against each other. They are both
I mean, it's
correct.
probably just a semantics kind of question, but I've always just
No,
wondered,
no,
like,
meaning the exercise, like you have to, like when you exercise, it
mm,
helps improve the uptake, uh,
yeah,
the recency uptake itself. Like, but that even that effect, people talk about post-workout window or get your nutrients in, all that. There is a post-workout window. It's not as intense as what we imagine it to be. Like you don't have to be within 30 minutes go and get in your
you don't have to eat
nutrition.
your boiled egg at the
Yeah,
gym.
you're talking like couple of hours. Like couple of hours, your muscles are a lot more sensitive to taking in nutrients. That's it. That's all it is. But if you're exercising regularly once every other day, let's say for example, you kind of are always in that workout window to some degree. If we broaden up the description of like what we describe that workout window as. So I think it's not like the exercise part, as long as you're exercising and you're stimulating your muscles, you're good. And then the more muscles you have, generally the more, of all these benefits you will get. Um, and most people, I think realistically speaking, most people will not reach a stage where it becomes it tips over into a negative because that takes very, very concentrated effort, which for most people that are listening to this, they are not going to be going down that path anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we move on and we say like, okay, beyond the metabolism and all that, and we just
Yeah.
talk about like financial, functional strength, and then I think we also touched on this in a YouTube short. If people are listening and then they haven't found our YouTube channel yet, we are also on YouTube and we release daily
We
shorts
are
on
trying
there.
to get everywhere. Yes.
But we also touched on the fact of like how increasing of muscle mass also helps to give you independence as you get older. You
Yep.
don't have to rely.
Yep.
So perhaps here you can also just share a bit about how does having more muscle directly impact our ability to do everyday tasks and then also maintain our quality of life long term.
Yeah. I think the key thing here, honestly, is just when you have more muscle, you have more capacity for strength. And when you have that baseline level of strength, a lot of everyday tasks become much easier by comparison, like relative effort to do them is very easy. Example, walking up the stairs. There's some people if you're really carrying excess weight and you are not exercising, you don't have as much muscle, you're not very fit, walking up the stairs can make you feel breathless. But the moment you lose some of the excess weight, the moment you strengthen some of those muscles, it's like not only have you taken off that 10 kilo backpack, but you've also increased your ability to handle this extra weight, right? And so those two things compound upon each other, and now you walk up the stairs, you're like, hey, you know what? I can walk up another 10 flights easy. So it's just by proportion that as you get stronger, daily tasks by comparison become so much easier that it's barely a thing. And very, very real world application of this or real world results of this is, senior folk, a lot of senior folk that are in their 60s and 70s, when they start strength training, I've trained last time when I used to do a lot of PT and a lot of personal training. I used to train, some ladies, some old men that were in their late 60s, going into their 70s. And so they come to me and they're like starting training at 67, for example. And there was this one lady I remember, she could not, she always said that, hey, when she used to lift up a kettle just to pour the water, she had to use two hands, literally use two hands to lift it up to try to pour. And she had to really like, tighten up her body and really like brace it just to be able to handle that. And the kettle is like, maybe the kettle is what, half a kilo, 1 kilo, you add maybe another half a kilo, 1 kilo of water. It's literally just two kilos, right? So for her, once she started training, that was one of the first things she told me, which is, hey, you know what? I realized that I can actually just pour my cup of tea now with one hand. I can just do that.
Small things that we take for granted, right?
And we take for granted right now, right?
Yeah.
Because we are still, well, younger and our bodies are still, Well, as young as they are going to be at this point in time. So, yeah, so that's a large part of it. Just having that strength makes everything much easier. When you also have that strength and you train and exercise and move your body, you actually develop and maintain your coordination as well. So when you maintain your coordination, you also maintain your balance. And I'm talking about balance like doing fancy stuff, standing on a Bosu ball or whatever, those are extreme examples. But I mean
Mm.
just general balance, like being able to stand on one leg while you wear your sock or something. When you're on a moving bus, right, you feel more rooted to the ground. You don't feel as unstable. Even when the bus jerks, you're like, oh, cool. You can brace yourself, you can grab something. You don't feel your body's a lot more resilient, you don't feel at risk. And so that's really a huge thing because we have talked about this before in many other episodes where as we get older, the risk of injury obviously gets higher if you don't, I want to say bulletproof your body, but it's really if you don't fortify your body. If you don't fortify, you don't strengthen it, you don't have the muscle that keeps your body resilient and your bones strong, you can break a hip, right? And hip fractures are actually one of the leading um, parallel causes for quality of life drop in seniors. So it's one hip drop, sorry, one fall and a hip fracture away from just like having the next 10 years be absolute shit. So that's really important to consider. Now
Mm.
my mom, like for example, my parents, my dad, you guys know, my dad's fit as hell. But my mom, she used to have yeah, very, very poor health markers, not because she was fat, but because she had no muscle at all. She's actually really skinny, and she thought like, oh, if I kept skinny, my health should be quite good, right?
Yeah.
But as you age, because she was losing muscle, so she wasn't exercising or anything, just doing basic housework. By the way, any basic housework and stuff does not really constitute exercise, okay? It's good to be active, but we have to hold a certain standard and say like exercise is exercise. But anyway, um, so once we actually got her to start lifting weights, she actually literally lifts weights now almost every day, similar to my dad, and then she strengthened up a lot. Not only did her health markers improve, her cholesterol, everything went down. Her body was better able to handle all the nutrients coming in. She also feels that quality of life difference. In fact, she recently had a fall, She had a fall. I mean, like, well, it's not a major fall. And again, the reason why it's not major is because now she's so much more resilient. She actually fell down, landed on the butt, but she got up. She was like, "Oh, wow, I have a little bruise here, but it's about it." You know, Nothing broken, no lasting damage. That is the power of
That's good.
exercising and
Yeah.
trying to put on muscle. It's not about like obviously I'm a bodybuilder, but it's not about the aesthetic part of it.
Mm.
It really is that functional health aspect of it.
Mm. I've seen this play out as well in friends' parents. Is I've also had where the one partner is quite, how should I say, focused on nutrition, but
Yeah.
it's like exercise. I don't want to be bulky, so it does not really
Yeah.
exercise. And
Yeah.
then the other partner is very active, not necessarily just doing resistance training, but
Yeah.
only parts resistance training, but mostly playing like table tennis, badminton, all these kind of things, almost on a daily basis. And then got to witness the two of them as they aged and see how the quality of life differs. You can see
Yeah.
the one who's doing the activeness all the time, getting
Yeah.
up, sitting down, no issue, moving around, no problem. The other
Yeah.
one, getting up, well, after a while it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
It's like quite a task to actually get out of the chair. So you have to now decide, okay, what kind of car do you want to buy? Because you cannot get a car that's too low. Otherwise, she struggles too much.
Yeah.
You cannot get a car that's
Yeah.
too high because she struggles to climb up into the car too much. So you need to get the just the right height so that she can get in and out easily enough. So all of these things now become a factor which previously you never would have to think thought about.
Yeah.
And then like when you travel somewhere, it's okay. So how's the entrance if I go to a restaurant? Like let's go for a family gathering. If we want to go into the restaurant, how's it? Do I have to navigate across? Like in Southeast Asia, your sidewalks are not all these well, beautiful, paved, smooth, flat surfaces. You get sometimes it's like going through the Ninja Warrior course, up, down, jump over this grid.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah.
sure you don't fall down that drain, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes,
And
I
so
walked with you to the to the from your place to the shopping center nearby, and yeah, it did seem like that when you were
so
walking.
this also becomes like um, questions and things you need to think about where previously you never had to. So
Yep.
as you were saying, is like not bulletproofing. What was the word you used?
Yeah, I said bulletproofing, but then I switched it to fortifying
Yeah. So by fortifying yourself through the like
fortification.
starting now in your 40s also helps you so that when you get to your 60s, your 70s, you
Yeah,
can also be moving around and not having to worry about these kind of things,
yeah,
but rather focusing on actually living your life.
yeah. You know what? That sounds like a really good name for a program we can create called the
For,
fortification program.
fortify yourself after 40.
Fortify yourself after 40, man. Uh, yeah. Well, be on the lookout for that. Okay. All of you, okay, I'm sure we will come up
All right. The other thing I want to also
with
touch
something.
upon is, bone health.
Yes.
Like my sister-in-law is also, she was told that she's like pre-osteoporosis kind of
Yeah, yeah,
thing. And she was advised like also to go and do resistance training.
yes.
And so she's gone and she started doing powerlifting of all things
Yeah.
and sort of
I
fallen
mean, it's
in
a
love
great,
with it.
it's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because you
she's
gotta lift. The goal is to lift more weights, and you have to coordinate all the muscles. It's a great all-in-one, to be honest.
That's right. So she got herself a coach and she's like sort of fallen in love with
Oh,
this
I love it.
exercise and going strong. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
see from my perspective when I interact with her and all that, I don't see any osteoporosis coming into to play. And when we talk about it, she
yeah,
hasn't really mentioned it again ever since the very first time before she started doing it. So
yeah.
from your perspective here, when you're talking about bone health, right? How does strength training and building muscle play a role in keeping our bones strong?
Oh, it really just increases the density. Like literally, that's it. Because if we could summarize this entire podcast into one sentence, it's if you don't use it, you lose it. Like it's as simple as that. And so your bones, as we get older, the porosity of the bones increases. So it means it gets more and more brittle because the bones have more and more little air pockets in them, if you will, or little spaces in between, right? And the structure of the bones become thinner and thinner. So when you train, you're not just training the muscles, you're actually training all your tissues, other tissues, which don't goes beyond just muscle tissue. You're talking about your viscera, you're talking about the tendinous structures, you're talking about the ligaments, which is bone. So the connectors between your bones, right? The ligaments, you're talking about the bones themselves experiencing tremendous amounts of stress from the weights that would trigger them to increase their density, and
Mm.
of course at some point as you age it just retains the density as much as possible. Yeah, so that's really all there is to it, and that's why especially for women it's so important to lift weights, like super important, because after the age of 25 to around 30, any time past that age, the bone density actually starts to drop off dramatically. For men, not so much. I think also just because on the baseline, most men generally have more muscle than women. So that seems to buffer that issue as well. Yeah, for guys, so our bone density doesn't seem to drop off as quickly. But for women especially, it's one of those things where you have to take that into account. So nutrition aside, getting enough calcium, enough vitamin D, all this kind of good stuff in that, yeah, sure, definitely do that. Get your iron, all that stuff, great. But you have to make sure that you're actually stressing the muscle, because these adaptations or these things that we are looking for in the body changes comes from the stress that we put our body under. Yeah, so it's a signal dependent thing. It's not like you can give it all the nutrients you want, but if you're not giving it the correct input signal on the other side, it's not going to actually make full use of it.
Mm. Right. So we've talked here about a lot about the physical benefits, right?
Yeah,
But there are also positive impacts on things like energy levels, mood, or even cognitive function that come from building muscle, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, those are flow-on effects as well, because just okay, from a neurochemical level, when you resistance train or even just general exercise, right, you actually trigger certain neurochemical um, adaptations as well. So obviously you produce, I think the most basic one is like uh, oxytocin, right? Like you get that feel good effect after you exercise in the brain, that lightweight feeling. That actually does help elevate your mood, 100%. The other part about it also is just general better brain function. Believe it or not, when you have more muscle, it actually kind of protects the brain a little bit better. And I do think also a large part of that is what I initially mentioned at the beginning, which is when you have more muscle, it has all these flow-on effects to enable better function of all the other internal organs. So that's the main thing with regards to having more muscle. Um, and then the better brain function generally just leads to you being able to be more alert, having better mental clarity. I believe there's some studies even where it actually, because of its impact on brain health as you age, it actually helps to slow down or delay any potential effects of brain regression, right? Which leads to all your dementia issues,
Mm.
brain conditions, Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's, stuff like that. Of course, those have other bigger contributing factors as well. Poor sleep, not enough sleep, things like this, because you don't get enough brain repair. Not having a healthy diet, to support the adequate brain function as well. So there's definitely a lot of factors that affect that, but obviously having more muscle is going to be one of those things that really, really helps.
There
So
is oh,
that's the main thing I would say. Yeah, the mental clarity and the cognitive health.
there is the other benefit that you get, which is probably not so much from having more muscle, but
Yeah,
from the developing of the muscle going through the exercise. I think you quoted, and I'm probably putting you on the spot here, but you quoted a statistic last time
yeah.
about how exercise actually helps to improve depression compared to medication. Can you remember the stat?
Yes, yes. I think it was about they compared depression medication only with exercise and depression medication and exercise only. Across, I think this was actually done with a few multiple studies because the one I read was a meta-analysis, which means it across multiple studies, right? So what they found is that the correlation between taking medication an improvement in outcomes was actually lesser than the medication and exercise combination by quite a bit. I think it was only one third of that, and then the exercise only was I think twice of just the medication only. So basically, what this all implies is just that. But again, I cannot remember the exact numbers, so somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember the takeaway from the paper was this: if you exercise, you are probably going to get at the very least similar benefits to taking medication without those side effects, right? If not, you'll probably get more and better lasting benefits already if you are suffering from any kind of mental dysfunction in that sense. Yeah, relating to depression. But if you combine maybe the medication together with the exercise, have probably the highest chance of getting out of it, and really managing it to a level which might feel really normal,
Okay.
very, very functional where you're thriving and having a good quality of life.
All right. So, one big question that I'm sure everybody always asks when it comes to this kind of topic is,
Yes.
are there any differences in how men and women gain muscle or the specific benefits they might see from increasing muscle mass after 40?
Oh, definitely not. Yeah, there's no difference in the benefits that they see, to be honest. I would say that women potentially see a greater comparison in benefits just because number one, there's not as many women um you know doing this, like lifting more weights. It's getting more and more popular, don't get me wrong, but they're still not like by natural inclination. Most women do not lift weights. And so those women that lift weights can see themselves like dramatically being different, sailing through menopause even easier, that kind of stuff. Because the transitional process becomes a lot easier when the body is healthy and ready to deal with it. Versus those who accumulate a lot of excess fat, all that kind of stuff, were consistently stressed out, which also kind of is exacerbated by the state of the body, things like this. And then they go through that aggressive transitional process of menopause and all. But the actual benefits themselves, I would say like the physiological benefits are similar across the board, you know. So it's very important that regardless, both men and women have to try to gain as much muscle as you can uh, within reason, right? Yeah, within reason. But obviously, most people again listening to this are not going to be the types that are. I don't think many of you are, are bodybuilders or anything. So yeah, so just try to become as obsessive as you can about it, because I think that will become the average level of what is required.
Okay. So that actually lead me into my probably my final question here. And that is,
Yeah.
considering all these benefits, um, probably a two-part question. One is
Okay.
like, how often should someone typically aim to be doing resistance training
Okay.
to see these improvements in muscle mass and strength? And then also couple that with what was the final advice that you would give to somebody that's just starting out in this?
Well, let me answer the first one then. Um, to be honest, I think the standard recommendation is something like 150 minutes of vigorous exercise a week, right? If you were to correlate that over to training, it could be maybe about 30-minute sessions in a week where you are training with weights. Because vigorous exercise can vary as well. It can vary because when they gave that recommendation, I think it's related more to, okay, go out, do some running, cardio and stuff. So I do think for most people that we see as a good starting point, 3 times a week, 30 to 45 minutes each time is probably a good start. If you can do more than that, great. For most of the clients that I train, to be honest, I actually start most of them out daily. I try to get them to do it daily, but a much shorter amount, let's say 10 or 15 minutes, starting at whatever level they're at. And the reason why is because when you're a beginner, you don't actually need a ton of stimulation to get benefits. So you don't really want to go in there and 100% balls to the wall every single session because you're still gonna get you're gonna get a great amount of benefits, but beyond, let's say like if you go in there and you do just 50% of the session, you're still gonna get like 80-90% of the benefit anyway. And then yet if you try to do the extra 50%, it's all this extra effort to get maybe the extra 10-20%. Like it's not worth it, right?
Mm.
I'd rather you build the consistency, I'd rather they build the feeling of feeling good after the workout, which is a very big one as well. So many times when we train people that are beginners that have a certain impression of like, oh, training is supposed to be super difficult, it's supposed to be super tough, it's going to be very painful, and maybe some of them even have had poor experiences with trying to do weights before with other personal trainers in the past, where the personal trainers tries their best to torture them or put them through their paces such that they're lying on the ground and all that kind of stuff by the end, and say, yeah, this is what a workout is like, and oh, it's I mean, there's a point for that, right? At some point, yeah, you have to really push yourself at some point. Don't get me wrong. But if you're just a beginner, you don't need that. You get so much more out of so little. So do the so little first and learn to love it. Because every time you do it and you feel good and you feel better, that makes you just want to do more and more over time.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's usually where we start people. So that's my recommendation really. And the big piece of advice, just stemming from that, is to go in there and yeah, just go in there, just give it a shot. I would honestly say if you can afford it, get a trainer. Yeah, get a trainer to kind of show you the ropes. A lot of times people make the mistake of hiring a personal trainer just to count their reps, right? But they don't really learn very much from the sessions. They just go in there and say, okay, the trainer just does everything for me, I just follow. And I don't think that should be the way because unless you want to be paying personal training forever, then you probably should get somebody to teach you how do you actually go about lifting the weights, how do you do it in a proper form. But if you do not have the budget for a personal trainer, don't look at that as, oh, I'm screwed. I can't do this.
Mm.
It- with YouTube, it is so easy. And now even with ChatGPT, you can easily put in and get your own program. The trick here is just to go into the gym. And my suggestion is if you're a complete beginner, you never exercised before, go into the gym, ask ChatGPT, hey, can you create me a 5-day a week program for for a 15-minute to 20-minute workout session using only machines that covers all the muscle groups. Start from there, and then you create something for you. Go in there, just use the machines. You cannot screw up using the machines. The machines are so idiot proof. And which is why I think a lot of times, Jim, that there was this myth that people say, oh, machines are bad for you and all that kind of stuff. This is my conspiracy theory side speaking, but I feel like it was mainly just spread by trainers that felt
Couldn't afford the
uh,
machines.
yeah, felt like, oh no, the if the people realize how easy it is to use the machines, they are not going to come to us for help. So we have to say no, free weight is better because it trains the stabilizers, blah blah blah. It's kind of nonsense. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, weight is weight, and the most important thing when you are starting out is to learn how to, how to feel your muscles, how to get a sensing for what it's like to actually train them, and you can do it at your own pace. Yeah, you can do it at your own pace. I think there's no rush to this. Just get started and progressively improve from there.
Okay. I think that's very good advice because I've fallen into that trap quite a few times where I do my workouts and then like friends or extended friends, they all tell, oh, I also want to give it a go. So then I invite them to come. But then what I do is I put them through my workout. Now that's after I've been, working
Yeah,
out for quite a while. So
yeah,
it's a bit more of an advanced workout compared to what would be preferable for a beginner. And so naturally, I never see them again after that one workout. And so
yeah.
I
It's
actually did sit
understandable,
and,
right?
and, and reflected upon it. And in hindsight, I was like, well,
Yeah,
actually, what I should have done is maybe just given them two
yeah.
exercises for that day just to introduce, these new
The
mechanics to
idea.
their bodies. And
Yeah.
we probably would have seen more longevity in their,
Yeah.
their new adventure.
You know what? I must confess that I was like that too before I even started coaching people, where my friends would be like, "Hey, can I train with you? I want to start lifting weights and stuff." And at the time, being young and being like very into, like, oh, you got to train hardcore. That's the only way you get results. Blah blah blah. I would really put them through the paces, and the goal was to make them feel it, and really make them feel the soreness, and then we take it as a point of pride after that. And then it was only in hindsight when I thought about it and I learned and reflected, I was like, nah, man, I didn't do something good. I made them associate lifting weights with a terrible experience. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could turn back the clock. So
Well, that's how we learn, right?
that's how we learn.
All right. So I think we've pretty much cleared up the fact that it's very obvious that building muscle is far more than just an aesthetic goal. It is a
Yes.
vital investment in our metabolic health, our physical function, our independence, and our overall well-being as we navigate life after 40. If any of the reasons that Twain has outlined resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to be this motivation to start prioritizing strength, please share this episode with them. You can find us on Spotify, on YouTube, we on Instagram, and now we even just started TikTok as well. So you can meet us on any one of those platforms, and hopefully we can grow in this together. But do be sure to hit subscribe on every one of the platforms to ensure that you never miss out on any of the content that we produce, and don't miss on any essential health and fitness insights that are tailored just for you. Any closing thoughts, Twain?
No, I think I said all I needed to say. Lift your weights. Everybody that's listening to this, lift your weights. You won't turn into a bodybuilder. Trust me. I've been trying my best to do it for 20 years, and I'm just where I'm at only.
All right, great. So join us next time on our 40 Plus Fit when we'll release the podcast next Monday. And until then, keep building that strong foundation.